I will go ahead and get started. So thank you all for joining. Today I'll be talking about effort reporting, just the basics about effort reporting, what it is, and how to prepare. So after you've attended, this is an hour-long session. After you've attended, we hope that you'll understand, what effort reporting is, what IBS is, or institutional based salary, cost share as it relates to salary and effort reporting, and how to prepare. We are not in data preview or pre-review period right now, but you can still prepare and get started with a lot of the legwork that needs to be done to complete effort reporting properly. And just overall also understand, why do we do effort reporting? I just added this little slide in here. It's a link to our policies, our effort reporting policies. We do have those published out there. They're on the uh, research page for OSP and for OVCR under that web page. It is not a separate policy that used to be under OBFS or BizFin. So either of these links will take you there. If you are new to effort reporting, I highly suggest reading through those. There are a number of policies that are specific to effort reporting, specific to IBS, specific to cost share, and they do give you a good foundation of how we do effort reporting here at UIC. Many institutions have their own process for doing effort reporting. We even deviate from our sister university at UIUC. So it is important to get familiar with those policies. So first I'll go over effort and effort reporting. Effort is a promise to our sponsor that that we will provide a certain level of commitment or work on the project. And it's usually written in the budget justification, the proposal. That's usually where you're going to see that commitment, that sponsor commitment. An effort reporting is the process after the fact, documenting what was actually worked. So an effort commitment is usually done at the beginning, usually during the proposal stage. And effort reporting is after the fact, sort of documenting and confirming what was actually worked. And, making sure that we fulfilled that promise to our sponsor. Effort reporting is, for an individual, it will always total 100% of their UIC time. So regardless of if an individual is part-time, if they're full-time, if they fluctuate, the 100% will always be of their UIC time, regardless of whether they work full-time or part-time. And of that time, in the little pie chart, it shows you that, not everyone is going to work 100% on sponsored awards. They may work in other non-sponsored areas. For effort reporting, that all kind of, the non-sponsored work gets lumped into one big bucket, and then all the sponsored work is detailed out by fund, by project, by grant code, and we need to document specific effort report or effort commitments or actual effort work for those specific funds. Effort is a percentage of an individual's time that they spent during the academic year on that project. And so for here at UIC, we do effort reporting once a year, and we do it on an annual basis. And we do it on an academic year. So I know that can sometimes be confusing when you have to deal with calendar year, fiscal year. Now we're doing academic year, as well as the budget periods for the awards. But just try to keep that in mind. And the reason for that is that most academic appointments, they are put on an academic year, so 8/16 to 8/15. And there tend to be less changes during that period, as opposed to going by fiscal year. There will be, changes and salary increases and that type of thing, and more likely to be a lot of changes. So We do it on an academic year basis. Effort reporting, we document 100% of their time, but for effort reporting purposes, we are more focused on the sponsored effort and the detail on the sponsored effort side. And then all that, like I said, the non-sponsored gets lumped into a bucket, but it does comprise their 100% of their time at the university. It will always equal 100% because, like I said, it's for the individual's total time at the university. We do give a range for what constitutes a full-time work week that can range anywhere from 40 to 80 hours that we've deemed reasonable. So it's not a one-to-one, everybody's on a 40-hour work week. We pretty much say what's reasonable in relation to their work because nobody can work over 100%. So sometimes we do hear those explanations, well, they work, 60 hours a week, and so they're 120% or whatever it may be. Really, that's going to the 40 to 80%, 40 to 80 hours is going to vary depending on the individual, but their effort will never exceed 100%. And so that's why we kind of have to make some adjustments there. But that gives you the reasonableness range. Effort certification is the way that we document that we've met an effort commitment for all of our sponsored projects. So we apply that to federal, private, state, city. We apply it to all of our sponsored awards. All sponsored awards have to have an effort certification for consistency purposes. However, it is part of the uniform guidance that this is a requirement. It's under section 200.430, and it goes about giving the details of what needs to be included in what many people refer to as your effort reporting process or your effort reporting policies throughout the year. Everybody, like I said, may institute a little bit differently. They may define IBS differently, and so it is unique to each institution and how they do their effort reporting. Also keep in mind that when we talk about certifying effort, it can be direct charge effort. It can also be cost shared effort. So that effort or that time that was spent on the project but didn't get charged. And I'll go into that later on when we go into the cost share section. But the total effort is going to be a sum of both direct charge and indirect charged effort for that project. Here's just a reference slide that you can look back on for types of sponsored awards that do not require effort. So such projects as equipment grants, conference grants, individual fellowships, etc. These are types of awards that come in that don't necessarily require a certain level of effort for the PI, or usually it's the PI. And really it's just a name attached to the award to bring it in for us to code it and enter it into the system, but not necessarily that individual is required to provide a certain level of effort. So in those cases, if you have any of these types of awards, it is okay to certify 0% for that PI. I would recommend and urge you to use the notes function, which you will probably see at our next training if you're not familiar with the ECC system and where to document that. But I would recommend anytime that you have a 0 level of effort to put a comment. And for these, just note that, it's an equipment grant, effort not required, and that is perfectly fine. Effort certifications, who has an effort report? So this has changed from prior years for those of you that have been here. We have either one of two forms of effort reports for everyone either charged to a sponsored award or who has effort on a sponsored award. They can either be an effort statement, which is essentially a faculty statement or what we would define as as faculty. And they will have their own individual effort statement with all of their sponsored awards detailed out. Anybody who falls in the non-sponsored bucket, which is essentially our non-sponsored, non-faculty bucket, they are essentially not faculty. They're not a faculty e-class. for UIC. So they could be an Urbana faculty member, but we've defaulted them to non-faculty so that, because essentially we don't have effort reports for them or individual effort reports. So they go on to what we call a project statement. So anybody that we code as non-faculty, these folks go onto a project statement, and one statement per fund will be generated, and that will be certified by the fund PI. And so essentially now everyone who is charged or has an effort on a project, on a sponsored project, will have one or the other. That is different in the past, and I won't go into that too much. And like I mentioned, it would be the fund PI that's going to certify each project statement, and then on the individual effort statements, that will be the faculty member whose report that they have. Now, if that individual left, we have a process for that, and we will always say the next most knowledgeable person. That typically next person is going to be their supervisor. Could be a department head, whoever it may be. We would say their supervisor because they should have some knowledge of the work that was done on those projects. In other cases, sometimes there are other unique circumstances where you have somebody else who's more knowledgeable. In those cases, we would definitely, we would need an explanation. Why is that person knowledgeable, etc. But generally, the individual who's certifying are the faculty. Okay. Any questions on effort, just the general topic of effort before I go into institutional-based salary? If you do, feel free to put it in the chat or unmute. I'll give it a second, or you can, we'll have other points throughout the presentation that you can ask if you think of something later. Okay. So I don't see anything there, so I'll move on. So institutional based salary, this is an important element of effort reporting because all the calculations are based on what we define as IBS. So IBS is institutional based salary, and it's what UIC has deemed IBS for this particular individual. That does not mean this is everything that an individual got paid during the academic year, because we have it has to meet certain criteria. Okay. And so I'll go into that on the next slide. But essentially, this is what the individual was paid for the year with meeting, certain criteria. And that's what all the calculations are going to be based off of. The pay must be paid through the university. It must be guaranteed. So that's the important part there. So being guaranteed and being shown on the NOA kind of go hand in hand, especially for those academic professionals. Those non-academic professionals, they may not have an NOA, or it may be a little bit different, but the key aspect here is that it's guaranteed. So those MSP programs that fluctuate, maybe variable pay, maybe they get a quarterly payment, those are not included. And we have some slides that kind of go through what's included, what's not. But anything that is not guaranteed tends to be excluded. And so on the next slide, I'll show you some examples. And those are the main points I wanted to mention there. The components of IBS that are included are the individual's base pay. Usually it's their salary line, their professor line, any administrative stipends, so any 0 FTE appointments that are paid, such as department head, director, etc. Those are also going to be included in IBS because that constitutes that individual's collective, duties at the university. Clinical appointments, physician surgeon salaries, those are also included in IBS. However, they may not be using that pay to meet effort commitments, but it is part of their institutional base salary, what we would define as their IBS. And then summer salary for those folks that are anything less than 12 over 12, meaning working 12 months, paid over 12 months. We have individuals that are typically, if they're not 12 over 12, they're usually 9 over 12, which means that they are getting paid for 9 months of work for the academic terms. I don't want to say academic year because that could also be 12 months, but for the academic term, and then they have summer where they may choose to work. And if so, then they can get additional pay. That is included in institutional base salary. It does not include lump sum pay. And like I mentioned, the MSP, DSP, those are variable pays that can, may be paid out quarterly or however often, but they are not guaranteed. They may fluctuate. And so we would exclude those. Overcomps, overload, these are for positions or duties at the university that aren't in line with their current job duties and done typically outside of the workday, outside of their typical duties, time frame, and as far as like duties and scope. That's additional pay that is not guaranteed. It's sort of looked at as a one-time event, something that's not happening regularly and not guaranteed. So therefore it is excluded. VA pay, clinic pay, they may have a relationship there, a joint appointment that is not UIC pay. So we would not include that in their IBS, as well as any sort of consulting board member pay that they're receiving. Those are not included in IBS. And then I want to bring a point home here that prospective and retrospective IBS can cause discrepancies in what you're expecting to see in an effort report. So prospective IBS is going to be, you create the budget, and maybe that was done 5 years ago for a 5-year grant. And, you may have included, or the business manager at the time may have included, salary increases, but in actuality, an individual may get a higher increase, they may have different changes, they may change positions. And so that all can affect, what you're expecting to see as effort percentages or even possibly dollars, depending on how you're allocating out to each particular award. So just keep in mind that what you may see in a budget may say 5%, and then when you go to effort reporting, you see 3. You definitely want to investigate that. Is that because this individual had an increase that we didn't anticipate and we just charged what was initially budgeted? So now it's going to show as less of their total salary. And then in those cases, I guess I won't get into that, but you want to reconcile those and actually certify what was actually worked. Let's see. I see that we do have a question. Could you elaborate a bit more on the summer salary inclusion? During the summer, faculty may be paid by a grant or their research funds, and this is not every summer. Are these included? These are included. It is, my understanding is, I think there's also an NOA that accompanies these summer salary appointments. Those are, once approved through the department, those are guaranteed. The department head, they're reviewing all of these, each department has their own process. If it's over 2.5 months on sponsored work, it does come through our office and we review for various things. And at that point, it ends up going through approval. So that is why it's included. If you have any other further questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And now we're going to test your knowledge. All right, so Dr. Martha Lowe is an associate professor in engineering. She is submitting a grant to NSF and requesting 2 months of summer salary. What salary should be requested in the grant proposal? So these are her elements to her salary. Faculty appointment, 9/12. It's a 9/12 appointment. She gets paid $200,000. She has an administrative stipend for $5,000, and then she received a summer lump sum or overcomp for $3,000. So I'm going to give you the options, and we are going to try to load a poll question. This is our first time doing it, and hopefully that'll make it easier. So go ahead and put in your answer. How much should we be requesting? We're almost halfway through the responses. And I will end the poll now. So it looks like most folks were leaning towards B, which is 200,000 divided by 9. It is a 9/12 times 2 months. However, the correct answer is C. We want to include the administrative stipend. That's the 0 FTE that is included in IBS. However, you will not end up charging that. A lot of times you are charging it to non-sponsored funds. However, that is part of their IBS. But that is their true IBS. That's why we can also get into some issues with, that we include administrative stipends in IBS. However, folks may not include it when they request a salary. And then when effort reporting comes, salary or IBS is bigger. And so then the percentages look smaller and they say, wait a minute, this person had 5% effort or 10% effort or whatever it was, but you're seeing less. And it's because we are including possibly an administrative stipend that wasn't included initially in the request. So they are included. Administrative stipends are included. The lump sum was not included because it's not part of IBS or what we define as IBS. And we want to make sure to divide that 9/12 salary by 9 to see what the true monthly salary is. You do not want to use the monthly rate of pay in Banner because it's paid over 12 months, but it's really for only 9 months of pay. And that's not really their true monthly earnings for that 9-month appointment. Any questions there on IBS before I go into cost share? If not, I will move on and feel free to put anything in the chat if you have questions throughout. So cost share is the university's financial contribution to the award. So in these cases, it can arise from many different forms, and it falls in a few different types of buckets. And I'll go through that in this section. It includes all expenses related to a project paid by the institution that's not directly charged to the grant. So that could be, payroll, non-payroll. For effort reporting purposes and for today's presentation, we are just focusing on the payroll related cost share. But it is something that's borne by the university that doesn't get charged out to the grant, but the person actually worked, a higher level of effort than what was charged in the form of salary. It is an administrative burden on everybody involved, especially, departmental business managers, central office. Once it's formally documented or put in a budget, communicated to the sponsor, then those are things that have to be tracked between our offices and making sure that we meet those commitments. I do also want to note that effort reporting is only the reporting of effort and salary, not fringe benefits. So, effort reporting does not include fringe benefits. You may also hear cost sharing referred to using other terminology such as donated, in kind, contributed, matching, voluntary. Those are all different ways of saying that this is effort that is not going to be charged to the award. Often it is going to be cost shared by by institutional funds or non-sponsored funds, but essentially it's not borne by the incurring sponsored award. So there are 3 main buckets of cost share. So we have mandatory committed cost share, which is required by the sponsor. This is often in the RFP or the request for proposals. And it will state in there if there's a certain level of effort or a certain level of cost share that is required. So that is considered mandatory and we are committed to it. Means usually we have a budget, a cost share budget, and so that's committed and in writing, and that means we have to track it. Another bucket is voluntary committed. This is where it's not required by the sponsor. It's not in the RFP, but we put it in our proposal. We put it in some sort of communication to the sponsor that, hey, we're going to work X percentage and we're not going to charge it to the award. And so in that case, we are still required to document and track because it is communicated to the sponsor, even though it's not required. This type of voluntary committed cost share is highly discouraged. There's even guidance out there that many sponsors either don't want you to cost share or include this in your budgets, or that it will not help in getting an award. So make sure that your faculty are clear on that before, if you ever see this, where it's not required by the sponsor, and really try to figure out if that can be removed from the proposal if you do see it. And then the last main bucket is voluntary uncommitted cost sharing. So this is where it's not required by the sponsor. We didn't put it in writing, but it just sort of happens after the fact. And so in this example, we say a grant does not require cost sharing. Nothing was mentioned in the proposal, so we didn't communicate anything to the sponsor. The PI is listed at 10%, but actually works 15. Well, how would you know that? Usually it comes around effort reporting that they tell you this. They may say, well, that says 10%, but I actually work 15. And then if you go to the budget proposal and you see, well, you budgeted 10, this is sort of above and beyond. This doesn't have to be, this is voluntary uncommitted cost sharing, unless they're asking you to do a reallocation, then, and you can charge it to the award. But sometimes that's when it can come up, and that's when you have to differentiate. Well, are we going to actually charge 15%? Can we charge 15%? If so, then labor redistributions will be required. But if they're just telling you, but don't have enough funds available to charge the 15%, then in that case, this really falls in the voluntary uncommitted cost sharing bucket, and you would really just only want to record what you're required, or what is required, and that would be the 10%. So this is just a nice little reference slide to come back to when you're trying to figure out, if you come across cost share, what type of cost share it is and what needs to be done. So then we have some other quasi cost share buckets. So we have salary cap, quote unquote, cost sharing. So this happens when a sponsor has a salary cap. The most common one that folks are probably aware of is the NIH or HHS cap. There are other sponsors. We do have those included in the ECC system. If you know of a sponsor that does have a salary cap and you go into ECC and don't see that in there, I would say definitely send us an email. We do have our email at the end of the slides, and you let us know and we can definitely add that in or look into it further. But that is something nice in the new system, is that we do have individual sponsors that we're aware of that have a salary cap, and we're including that in the ECC system to be flagged. So in this case, we just have an example where an individual or a faculty member at UIC, they earn $250,000. The current NIH calendar year 2024 cap is $221,900. So even though the PI earns $25,000 for that 10% of effort, we're not able to charge that to the award. We can only charge based on the cap, which is $221,900, and that would come out to $22,190 for 10% effort. So the difference between what's actually earned and what can be charged to that award is considered salary cap, quote unquote, cost sharing. It is not a true form of cost sharing because it is deemed an unallowable cost if we had a cost share commitment. That is not something that could be used as cost share, but in the general sense of the word, it is a cost borne by that grant that cannot be direct charged, and therefore carried by the university, which kind of makes it cost share. So that's sort of a quasi bucket. We do want to differentiate that in ECC. We do want to record, say the 22,190, say that shows up as 8% in ECC. We do want to record 10, the additional 2% as cost share in a general cost share bucket, even though it's salary cap. And in total, we want to make sure that we're documenting that total 10% effort that's required. All right. So we have another check here. How many salary caps does NIH have? And we'll go ahead and launch that poll. All right. So we have a lot of answers all over the place. Looks like the majority are going with 1 cap. We have some folks that have said 2, 3, and I don't know. Well, this was actually a trick question. I think most of you are familiar with the typical NIH cap or HHS cap that changes every calendar year. If you're looking at it from an effort reporting perspective, there are 2 caps in effect. You're going to have calendar year 23, calendar year 24. So that you might have been thinking of it from that perspective. But in addition to that, we have K awards where individuals, we're capping their salary, or their salary is capped at maybe 75,000 or 90,000. And if they earn more than that, that is another form of salary cap. Maybe not the one that we all think of right away. But that also is something that we need to be mindful of when we're certifying effort. As well as graduate assistantship compensation. There are caps on that. There's more than salary that goes into that consideration, but these are different forms of caps. So just be mindful of that when you are certifying effort.
Katrina, we did get a question about cost share.
Okay.
But, so the question is, there's instances where cost share is listed in the proposal, and then the unit shares the information that sorry, I'm reading through this, that the cost share was voluntarily uncommitted. Hold on.
Okay, yeah, I think I see the question. So they initially include effort in the proposal. The sponsor asks them to return it for budget adjustments. And then they have an example where they're reducing effort on the fund or maybe charging it to non-sponsored. Says if we are using faculty research funds to pay the salary reduction proposed, for example, would this fall in voluntary committed cost share? I think it depends on who the individual is. If they are key personnel, then they are the person running it. There's no way that we can certify that they had no effort. And in those cases, you would want to document cost share. In those cases, I would say that's voluntary committed. However, if this is not key personnel, then that is something that I would say, we're not, the sponsor isn't concerned if that person is on the project or not on the project. They're not concerned with their effort. And in that case, I would say it's not a requirement by the sponsor. It really depends if it's, a PI, which by default they are key personnel, or anybody else deemed key personnel by the sponsor. Let's see. So I think hopefully that answers your question on the cost share. If it is, key personnel, obviously we do want to document that in the effort reporting system. And if they are not key personnel, not required, then we would consider that voluntary uncommitted, and you would not need to document that in the system in ECC. And as far as setting up another FOAP, that is something we would recommend. I don't think we really have a strong policy on that right now, especially if the cost share is just salary. And oftentimes, if faculty are not being charged as sponsored awards, then they're usually on state funds. And we don't want to require everyone to have to go through the burden of setting up multiple funds. If really it's all sort of going to one place, you just have to know to recognize any voluntary committed cost share or mandatory committed cost share at the time of effort reporting. And so you could still charge it to the state funds. But I would say if you have a lot of other cost share commitments, even sponsored, non-sponsored, then that might be a good idea to, keep it all in one place, so that you can easily report out when it comes time for closeout and reporting. Okay, it looks like we have another question. How do you handle when PIs have several people on a budget with effort but no salary? I think they do this. Okay. I would say, I mean, it really depends. Are they key personnel? If they are not key personnel, then I believe we call these folks key contributors. And so I think there's a little bit of other terminology, but that kind of gets them off the hook for being deemed key personnel and having to commit that level of effort. Sometimes we see that if they're mentors, where they're available when needed, but they're not required to commit a certain level of effort. They need to be there, but they don't have to certify a certain number. You don't know what it is. In those cases, if they are key personnel or they want them to be key personnel and there is no effort, there should be some level greater than 0 of effort, and that is in our policies. So that is something you can bring to your faculty if they insist that these folks should be key personnel but have no effort. They do have to have some. They don't have to charge a salary. It can go to non-sponsored, but we would have to essentially show that it's cost share. That is going to be recorded as cost share at effort reporting time. So I'm going to pause on the question so I can go through some of the other rest of the slides, and then maybe if we have some time, we'll come back to these questions. If not, we can respond to the questions that are currently in there after the presentation. And then another quasi cost share bucket is after the fact cost sharing. So this typically happens, it can happen for a multitude of reasons, but essentially it's often because the grant is over budget. And so we're not able to charge that full salary amount. So sometimes we want to make funds available for other things on the award, and maybe the faculty member will say, we'll move some of my salary off so we can, charge the graduate assistant. That's fine if that's how it needs to be budgeted. Obviously, we can't go over budget or can't remain over budget. But you do have to remember to recognize that effort or that salary that was moved off as a form of cost share. So that's something that happens after the fact. And that's if, you have to meet a certain level of effort, then you do want to record that. Effort paid by non-sponsored funds during no-cost extensions. This is a big one. We hear this a lot, that during no-cost extension, well, they had no effort because it was a no-cost extension. What is probably intended, what was meant to be said, is that we didn't charge any salary to the award because there were no funds available, but there is still some level of effort. If the PI is overseeing the grant, maybe something else is still being completed, but that PI is ultimately responsible for seeing that project through the end. So they are doing some level of effort. It may not be a lot, but they are doing something to oversee it, and they can reduce it. Often a lot of, you want to make sure you're clear on your sponsor's terms and conditions, but making sure that you notify your sponsor if you are reducing your effort from what was originally proposed. But many sponsors have allowed folks to reduce their effort without notification during no cost extensions, but that's important to make sure you're clear on that with your particular sponsor. But that is something to keep in mind. No cost extension does not mean that you can put 0% effort. It just means you didn't charge any salary. And then you have to figure out and work with your faculty member, what was their level of effort. We often hear that, we see that we see a no cost extension. We don't know what that revised budget, that revised effort is. And oftentimes it is reduced than what was, actual effort during the original performance period. And so that's something you want to get together or collaborate with your faculty member on if you're not sure what that level of effort should be. And then also, if the grant's an overdraft, we have to move something off. We highly recommend moving non-sponsored or non-sponsored, non-personnel items because it affects effort and effort reporting. And if you do this after the fact, we may have to revise an effort report. So if you can, we would recommend moving non-personnel items instead of personnel. But sometimes we do have grants where all it is personnel, and so you do have to remove that effort. And so just making sure that you still certify the same level of effort, just now it's split between direct and cost share. So we have some more knowledge check questions. So Dr. Martha Lowe is back, and now for her third summer month, she has an NIH project, and we want to find out what is her IBS. We're going to ask you guys, what is her IBS? Is she over the sponsor's cap, and how much can she request for the summer month? And we give, that equates to 8.3% effort for a 12-month appointment. So the rest of these are pretty easy, true, false, got a 50-50 chance. What is her IBS? Is her IBS 205, true or false? All right. We can go ahead and end this poll. It is pretty split here. The answer is false. IBS is 200,000, the professor line, or the faculty appointment, plus the administrative stipend, plus, or this is their times 12. So we're multiplying it times 12 because she is now going to get 3 summer months of salary. So that's what she would earn, maybe not all that she would charge to the grants, but that will be her IBS at the end of the academic year. All right, so we have the other part of this. Is Dr. Lowe over the NIH cap? Dr. Lowe is over the cap, true or false? And the prior cap from the prior slide was 273, 333, 33, for those that forgot. All right, we can end that poll. And that is true. So like we showed on the other slide, 273, 333 will be her IBS, and that is over the NIH cap. Keep in mind, NIH cap is based on a full-time appointment, 1.0 FTE for 12 months. If anybody is less than 1.0 FTE during the year or works less than 12 months, say they don't get summer salary and they just work 9/12, then we need to reduce or prorate that salary for those reductions. So that is an important point when calculating out. And then I also put it in the form of the monthly pay to see, you can compare that as well to see, are they over the monthly cap? Because sometimes you haven't had a full year yet and you need to know, if during the 9 months, are they over the NIH cap? Are they over that rate of pay? So sometimes the monthly comes in handy. And then lastly, how much NIH summer salary can Dr. Lowe request? True or false? 22,777.
$17,083.
All right, you guys did, you're responding better than than last time, which is good to see, at least on this question. Let's see. The answer is false. Although we have 22,777 or 777, as the third summer month, that's what she will earn, but we cannot charge that to the award. And we don't want to request more than that because it is over the sponsor's cap. So based on the NIH cap, that is the max allowed, 18,491.67. And so the difference is salary cap cost share. So she can still be paid that, it just can't be charged to the award. And you know, different units have different policies on this. I won't get into that, but in this case, we would request less from NIH, but she could potentially earn a little bit more because that is her university rate of pay. All right, so we will, let's see, I know that we had some questions in the chat, but I am going to keep going with the presentation because we do have less time, and then I can get back to anybody whose questions we didn't answer. And if at the end we have some time, we can try to answer those as well. So how to prepare? Start early. So right now you are starting early. You know, pat yourself on the back. You're attending this presentation. This is prior to pre-review, and you can actually get started now in preparing for pre-review. We recommend, you know, and so, you know what, I think most of these slides kind of go through this. So I would say visit our webpage often. This is on the research.uac.edu, sponsored programs, effort reporting. There's an effort reporting tab, and then we have, we will post this presentation, we'll post the slides, we'll post a recording, whichever of last week's and this week's is the best recording. We have links to both the current ECC system, last year's system, our email address. We have video, short little video instructional videos for business managers, as well as a couple for faculty. We have a couple of job aids. So we are trying to add more, especially now that we have a new system and there is a need for some additional training tools. So keep visiting there frequently because we will be adding new things. Here's a list of our live training. We had one last week. It was the same presentation that was today. And then we also have one next week, which will be more of an introduction to the system and how to use the system as it relates to effort reporting. Keep in mind, if you attended last year's training, this will be a majority of last year's training. It will be a recording. We'll kind of do a little bit of a individualized introduction for AY24, but it is the same recording. So, you know, you can do what you want with that and decide if you would like a refresher. It has been a year, or if you feel you've been in the system enough this year, all throughout the year since last year, that you may be familiar with how it works. And then we'll also be adding mini sessions, what we call mini sessions. It will be hour sessions, but we'll try to keep it short with, you know, hot topics that are important that have come up during effort reporting that we really want to hone in on. We have some ideas on what those will be, and feel free to send in any suggestions on what you would like to have mini sessions on. These will happen during pre-review. Pre-review will start on October 7th. It will last 3 weeks, and then there will be 2 weeks of certification. That is the general game plan. Obviously, that could change if maybe some other IT issues or other things may change in, but it's basically a 5-week period. But don't let 5 weeks deceive you. It's a lot of work for those that know. And so if you can get started early, that's in the best interest of everyone. And then also, if none of those, you know, you have very specific questions, you need more assistance, you need more hands-on, definitely email us at ospeffort@uic.edu and we can try to set up a one-on-one meeting. So like I said, these are the different resources on our page. We recommend going to sources like KC or My Research Portal to get budget justifications, get the budgets themselves. NIH Commons, any sort of project reports, any emails that you may have from sponsors or sponsors from faculty telling you to reduce effort, increase effort throughout the year. You know, grab those documents so that you can go back and check and make sure that the salary and the effort is reflected appropriately. If it's not, you can go in and do labor distributions right now. It'll show within a couple of days in ECC. So you can do that. You can make those adjustments right now if you see that they are needed. We recommend, tracking effort throughout the year. And so when it comes effort reporting time, then you can, just refer to your documentation that you have that's been tracking all throughout the year instead of having to go through all of these budgets and justifications and all of that. This would help with, reviewing the monthly ledgers, your financial reconciliation meetings with your faculty, whether you do them monthly or quarterly. I will say put a plug in there from the audit side. Please document when you do meet with your faculty. We do sometimes get asked for that under single audit to show that there is a review process of expenditures after they posted to the award. So if you are doing that, either if it's an email confirmation or if it's an actual, hard wet signature, that is a good practice. Let's see, you can also get it from their other support pages. These are all resources that you can use to kind of help make sure that what you're reporting is in line with what they're reporting to the sponsor, what the sponsors have in hand. And if you find discrepancies, then that's when you need to reconcile and maybe reach out to our office and we can try to help you figure out what needs to happen. And then the next slide is just sort of an example of what something like this might look like, but it can be however it works for you, especially now that I know folks are probably familiar with Eddy and Webby and running their own reports. You might have something else that you already currently use. Something that we are stressing right now is now prior to pre-review and even during pre-review, you can do this, but if you can get a head start, verifying you have access if you are going to be responsible. If not, email us and we can help get you set up. If you do have access, making sure you have access to the right orgs, especially if you've recently transitioned or transitioned between this year and last year's effort reporting. Let us know if you're a primary, which is, you're going to get these effort reports on your work list, and those are pretty much assigned to you. But if you're a secondary, that means you have access to these reports, but they're not, the project statements may not be on your specific list, but both folks have access to the reports and can work on them. So the important thing is just making sure you have access to the reports that you need. And if not, reach out to us and then we can try to help set that up. We do have a couple of job aids on how to view and how to review who has access. Do you have the right access? And so those two job aids have recently been put out there: effort coordinator access, viewing your job or viewing your org, and the effort coordinator list with all orgs in case you need to collaborate with folks and need to know who the effort coordinator is. Review your dashboard, make sure, on your dashboard that you are able to access. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, next week's presentation about ECC and the dashboard and all of that will make a little more sense. Request proxies or designees for certifiers that have left the university. We're going to be adding a job aid, either a job aid or a recording, not quite sure yet, but to help you figure out how do I find those folks that have left that are in there, because it is not readily available by looking at your dashboard to know who is the certifier if somebody's listed as a proxy. So we'll help you figure that out. But that's a good time as well. If you see someone's name that's no longer here, let's make sure that we have a proxy set up for them. And then these are just some references that you can look at to validate IBS, making sure that the IBS you're seeing in ECC is correct. If all of the summer pay has not been paid out this year, then it's not going to be correct. So just make sure that you get any of those requests in, the sooner the better. We have had some linger out really long and it affects effort reporting. Maybe it was certified and now we have to go back because some summer pay got paid out really late. So just make sure that IBS is looking right to you. Let's see, and just keep in mind when you are in ECC right now, it is not the final stages. We are still doing some more making some edits to it. We're adding what we call zero pay, or so for faculty or PIs who have no salary charge but are listed as a PI at some level in Banner. We're adding an entry so that you don't forget to certify effort. If they didn't charge any, did they still have effort? Do they not? So we will add those in. Summer pay may still be loading. We do have to do calculations outside of the system excuse me, to determine their annualized FTE. And that will factor in what, whether the system flags them as over the cap or not. That will impact some of the calculations if you use the calculator in ECC to determine effort. So we are working on that to hopefully get you all access and see, well, what's the annualized FTE that we have in there, and helping to validate that information to see if that might be off for an individual. Maybe that's why you're not seeing the right figures. This is just a reminder of those types of pay that are not included in IBS. So I'll skip past that. Effort entries. So we want to urge you that we know the last system, the effort calculator was built in. You had to use the calculator to determine, what the effort was at the system. We do have a calculator which will show in next week's presentation or where that's at, but it is in ECC under the links tab, and you should be using that for every fund, every one that you're working on, or for every individual, to make sure to validate that salary that's being charged. We are not just validating, or we are not just confirming payroll. We're not just saying, yes, 5% of their salary went. We are making sure, okay, we charge 5%, but their total effort was 7%. Maybe it's because they were over the cap. Maybe it's because they were in overdraft and we didn't charge all the salary, but we want to certify what was their actual effort. So that's something to make sure that you're clear on when completing effort reporting. And related to that, effort is not always just a direct reflection of direct payroll, especially those folks that are over the cap, or cost sharing a certain percentage, or maybe we forgot to charge effort. This is the time for us to recognize that and to make adjustments. Anytime that you are certifying 0% effort, make sure you're putting a comment as to why it's 0. It could have been those types of awards that don't allow effort. And please note that if it's not, you definitely should be putting an explanation as to why you're not certifying any effort. And just a quick explanation on ARS versus ECC. ARS is the activity reporting system. Essentially, it's very similar to ECC, but it's the inverse. It is done for state reporting sides, and they get details on the specific non-sponsored activities, teaching, departmental research, et cetera, and want to know a specific level, want to know the percentage of effort spent on those things, and then sponsored effort kind of gets lumped into one bucket. It is done on the fiscal year, as opposed to effort reporting is done on the academic year. So just know that these two are different. There is some relationship, but they are different. They're done on a different time frame, and so it's not always going to be a one-to-one match when you're looking at those. This is another reference slide. Folks that have employee classes listed below are excluded from effort reporting, and that's basically because they either are not considered a true employee for fellows. That's applicable. And then one-time pay, lump sum pay, that means this individual typically will not have an NOA. They don't have general guaranteed pay. It's sort of a one-time thing. So we do exclude those from effort reporting. And then I know we also get some questions on person months, how to calculate. So if a person budgets 10% effort for 9 months, 10% times 9 equals 0.9 person months. You can sometimes see CM for calendar months, SM for summer months. So those are just different variations, but essentially these are all forms of person months. Sometimes you see that in the budgets, and so that's how this can help you convert those back to percentages and get an idea of what you're seeing in ECC is correct. Then here's just some some banner screens that you can reference, and that can help you with effort reporting, may be useful.